All right, how to catch bass during August on dam influenced waters. Man, I'm telling you, it can be tricky. It really has a lot to do with whether they're pulling water or not. And the really fun part about it, if you want to call it that, is sometimes when they're pulling water, that really makes the bite turn on and it's exceptional fishing. Or it could turn off the bite, especially if it's too much water, the current's too strong. One thing I can tell you is if they're not pulling any water, that's arguably the worst time to be on a river, because the bass pull out. A lot of times they suspend, they scatter. It's really hard to find them and hard to catch them. But you know, it's a fine line when they do start pulling current. I don't like it when they're pulling too much current. When it's super strong and going crazy, I don't know, the bass just seem not to bite very well for me. But if you got a good, regular amount of current for your body of water, that's a prime time to be out there. And sometimes you're out there and it's really stale, nothing's going on, then they open up those gates and game on, man, like Donkey Kong. So where do you need to be when that happens? Well, this is the key, is it's all about location, location, location. So the main thing about, if you got largemouth like a little bit of slack area with woody cover and weedy areas. If you can find that right near the current areas, that's generally a good spot to target the largemouth, especially if there's some weeds in there they can hang out in. But if you got some laydowns where the trees have blown into the river, or some stick ups, or maybe some wing dams made out of wood, the largemouth tend to congregate towards that woody cover. So that's kind of where I would look for largemouth in the river. And smallmouth is more rocky, boulders, gravel, chunk rock, clay banks. Those are the things that attract the smallies. They like to hang out in that area. A little bit deeper water too, with a little, and they like to be more in the current than anything else, with maybe some things breaking the current. Like I mentioned, wing dams, but bridge pilings can be another one where they just stack up there. And both bass like to be behind islands. They'll hang out behind, if you got good amount of current, then downstream part of the islands, it's a good area to target for both species. If the current isn't very strong, then work on the sides of the island or even the front. Sometimes you get like a push where the water's coming down on the island and you get this barrier of water that's been pushed in front of the island, and it's kind of a slack area. And it works just like the slack water areas on the back end of an island. But as the water current changes and the flow gets stronger or lessens, those bass will go from behind the island and work their way up the sides to the front. So don't think they're always behind an island. I guess that's the key thing I'm trying to say here. They can be anywhere along that island if you don't find them in the back part of it. Same thing if you're looking for the depth change. It's a real shallow, the current runs faster there, and then you get an area where it's real deep. A lot of times the bass will sit in that deeper pocket waiting for things to wash by. And as that current fluctuates, it depends on how deep they're going to be. Sometimes it doesn't take much, more like a ditch, and other times you're looking at a 10-foot drop or more. The stronger the current, I think the deeper the bass go in those areas, in those pockets. So keep that stuff in mind. As far as the lures to use, man, I'm telling you, spinnerbait works really well. I love fishing spinnerbait, double Indiana blade. In all these conditions, everywhere, even in the faster moving current, works really well. I catch a lot of bass. If you can find areas where there's some big boulders that break up the current, you can run a spinnerbait over the top of them. A lot of times there's a bass right behind it, really ready to annihilate it. So that's a blast. Buzzbaits work really well. It's not just a morning thing. Buzzbaits can work all day long on river. And when they turn the floodgates open and that current gets going, it fires up the whole food chain, the bass get biting, and a buzzbait's a pretty aggressive way to go after them. You fish it slow enough where it just churns the baits. You can burn it back. I don't say you don't want to. You can try burning it back. You can try a couple of different retrieves. Sometimes they want it really fast, but most of the time, the most productive retrieve is keeping it just slow enough or fast enough to keep the blades churning, and that's about it. You bring it across those weeds and those areas where the bass will hang out in, and bring it over the tops of their heads, and they'll whack it even if it's a bright sunny day like right now. That current, they tend not to follow the same rules as bass do in lakes. Finally, another lure there's two more lures. Another lure that is underutilized in rivers and streams, I think, is the tube. The tube, I've had probably my most success on a tube catching bass. And the weight is the key. Is how much weight do you need? You have to change that up depending on the amount of current that you have. The more current, the heavier weight you need. I've had as much as ½ ounce weight on a tube. They don't make a tube jig that heavy that'll actually fit inside the tube, so that's when I switch over to a split shot rig. It's almost like a Carolina rig at that point because I'm using a ½ ounce split shot on the, it's a Mojo sinker in the front. I like to use the Mojo sinkers because they don't get hung up as much in those rocks as a true split shot. So kind of keep that in mind. But I like that rig because you can change the weight out pretty easily depending on how much current you have and where you're fishing and get it up there. You just want it to kind of go along with the current, kind of bumble along. Maybe you might stop a little bit, you just lift up on your rod and it picks it up again and starts to move it down with the current again. You don't want it too heavy where it stops every time unless you lift the rod up. Then you got too heavy of a weight there. But just enough for the weight to carry it downstream to any bass that's sitting down there laying in wait. Those channel edges, those where it turns in and you've got this breakwater right there and a sharp edge, maybe some weeds that are in there. The bass will be sitting in there, you just bring that tube over it and you can catch a lot of fish that way. Another bait that's really underutilized in rivers, I believe, is the Wacky rig Senko. Okay, the Wacky rig, or it could be a yum dinger or any kind of soft plastic stick bait. But Wacky rig works even in August. You're talking, it's hot out, it's bright sunny out here, but the current is what keeps the bass active. And you can get it out there in the weed lines where the bass are active, or in those rock piles, or in those banks where there's a creek bend, what have you. You get that Senko up there and just let it fall weightless on a Wacky, and you'd be surprised how many fish you caught. I mean, here's a picture of me. I look drunk. It's almost 100 degrees out. And I caught this 6-pound smallie in a weed bed right alongside the edge of the current. It was really adjacent to the current. It was up in shallow water right next to the current break. And that was right where the bass was sitting. So you look for those edges, look for those current breaks, and that's, get that Senko or that tube right up in that current break where the water's all rippling and make sure you bring it through there. That's oftentimes the bass will come out from slower moving current and nail the bait fish right there or nail your bait and run back into that slack water area. So those are real key areas to fish with those baits. I hope that helps. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.